In today's lesson, we're going to talk about angles that are congruent and how they are formed, and they're formed from perpendicular lines. And then we're also going to talk about the reflexive property. So the first question says, which angles are congruent in the picture? And you can say that because of this right here, this statement that line L is perpendicular to line M, since these two lines are perpendicular, then that means that each of them forms a right angle. And over here it just plainly states that angle 4 is a right angle. So I can say angle 1, angle 2, angle 3, and angle 4 are all right angles, which means that they are all congruent angles also. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, is congruent to angle 3, is congruent to angle 4. So this picture demonstrates two new rules that can be used in proofs, and the first one is if you have perpendicular lines, then you have right angles. Oops. Right angles. And also, if you have right angles, then we also know that those right angles are congruent because they're all 90. So then we have congruent angles. So moving down to the next part, we're going to find the missing measures, which we have done in the past, in the first unit. So we're going to look at this set. We have two lines that are intersecting, and we know that they form a straight line. And if they form a straight line, then they each equal, or together they equal 180. So to find the missing angle right here, I would take 180 and subtract it from 145. And when I do that, I get 35. Okay, and now we can talk about vertical angles, because if the 35, angle 35, which is right here, so let's clean this up here. So we have 180 and 35 on here, and the vertical angle to 35 is right here. So these two angles are congruent, and these two angles are congruent. We mark that because they're not the same measure. We put two congruency marks. And going over to example number 2, I can say since this is 65 right here, then this has to be 65 because they're vertical angles. I'll write that a little nicer so you can read it. So that's 65. So they are congruent. And I can tell, so that's what I figured out just by looking at that. And then I'm kind of stuck. I don't know what else to do. So then I look at this set of directions right here, and it says line BE, which is this line right here, is perpendicular to line CG. And when we have perpendicular lines, we know that we form right angles. So I am going to put a right angle here and a right angle here. And so I know this is 90. And if this angle right here is 90, then I would have to take 90 minus 65 to get this angle right here. And when you subtract it, you should get 25. So let me erase that, kind of clean it up a little bit. Let's rewrite that too and make it better. So we have 25 here. And if this is 25, then its vertical angle, which is over here, is also 25. And I know that's right because this angle here should form a right angle. So 65 plus 25 equals 90. Okay, now we have these two angles, angle EAF and angle FAG, that we can figure out, but we just have to do a little more work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this and rewrite things without markings. So if I erase and put what we know. We know this is a 90. We know this is 25 and vertical angle, so that's 25. And here we have a vertical angle, so that's 65. And we already talked about this one, but we still have this piece of information that's going to help us. So if I mark DH, line DH is perpendicular to AF, then I know that this will be a right angle, and so will this side. So I have to find that missing side. Well, I know that to find this one right here, FAG, I would have to take 90 minus my 25 from right here, because together they form a right angle, so they equal 90 degrees. When I take 90 minus 25, I get 65. And same thing goes on this side for EAF. I know that DAF is a right angle, so 90 minus 65 here equals 25. There. So now I can say that I know every single angle on that picture. Moving down to the next one, if QRS, so anytime it says something, I want to outline it so I know what angle they're talking about, is congruent to angle TRU. So those two are congruent, and then it says which other angles are congruent. Well, I know that angle SRT is congruent to itself. So SRT, angle SRT, is congruent to angle SRT by the reflexive property. And that's going to go into or come into play when we have overlapping angles in our next section. And over here, if we have segments, it says segment WY and segment XZ are congruent, so they're the same. So let's just put a number in there. If we have 50 here, the whole thing equals 50, and 50 up here. Let's just say that if we know the whole measure is 50, I can say this middle section, XY, is the same distance for both WY and YZ. So if I said that's 30, then this would have to be 20, and this would have to be 20. But the reason I'm doing this is because I need to be able to say that XY is congruent to XY by the reflexive property. With this information, you should be able to now start your homework, which is page 127 through 128, 8 through 13, and 17 through 21. Remember, we have the perpendicular lines form right angles, and right angles are congruent angles. And we also have reflexive property to talk about.